21st, 2021 Wilson School Board meeting to order.
Hold on, can we turn the mics up, please?
Good evening. Good evening.
You hold it in front of you.
Good evening. I'd like to call June 21st, 2021 Wilson School Board meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hayes.
Here.
Mrs. Casper.
Here.
Dr. Kennedy.
Here.
Mrs. Cocker.
Here.
Mr. Martin.
Here.
Mr. McCrae.
Here.
Mr. Negrini.
Here.
Mr. Schneider.
Here.
Mr. Hart.
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Please stand for the pledge of the flag. Mr. Maravich.
Do we have any agenda items?
Do we have?
Any public comment on agenda items?
Okay, may I reserve my
May.
instructions then till the end?
Sounds good. And Mrs. Cocker, please. Tonight, we have the introduction of a student representative to the board for next year. Dr. Faley, can I turn that over to you?
Certainly. Gianni, I'm going to turn it over to you and allow you to do your thing in introducing our newest board representative for next school year.
Thank you, Dr. Fadley. Today, I'm happy to present the 2021 to 2022 Student Government President, Maddie Negrini. She will be joining the board as the student body representative next year. Maddie is involved in student government, mini-thon as an entertainment captain, mental health council, swimming, water polo, and she is a class officer. Congratulations, Maddie, and good luck next year.
Maddie, would you like to say anything this evening?
Thank you very much. I'm really excited for this upcoming school year. And thank you to Gianni. She's been a really great mentor in the past couple of weeks, just telling me how to handle this next year. And I'm just really excited for this opportunity.
We look forward to having you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Grab Team Roboff.
Thank you, President Hart. It's my privilege this evening to introduce Sean Dowdy and John Badia, who will be providing the board with an update on Phase 1 of our construction project with a short PowerPoint presentation, and they will be available to answer any questions the board might have at the conclusion of their presentation. So thank you, gentlemen, and you can take it away and start your presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Tall gentleman to my right is Sean, who has been transitioning into the project over the last month and a half. As perhaps some of you know, Chris Barnett moved off into the Carolinas. Wish him well. And we've been working together with the administrative team and wanted to provide you an update this evening where we are with the high school project. So tonight what we're going to do is highlight some of the tasks that we've completed to date. We're going to review the design and scope of work, talk a little bit about the schedule, and then a little bit about the market conditions and what we're seeing based upon other bids that are being received and reaction to the industry that we're seeing with the project budget. Address any questions you have, and then really tonight marks the next phase of going into the construction document phase. So we're going to share some drawings and updates with you as well. So in terms of our specific tasks, and some of these slides have a lot of information. We don't need to go through it in great detail, but as Dr. Fadley mentioned, for the purpose of posting on the website, we wanted to give a thorough review of ongoing meetings, continuing to meet with faculty and staff, both in performing arts and food services, ongoing surveys, continue to develop the floor plans and designs and elevations that we're going to share with you this evening, working closely with the engineers and Mr. Simcox to develop the parameters for the design of the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems for the building. Also working closely with the civil engineers on developing land development plans for submission shortly. And tonight we're going to show you some first look of the interior of the main Performing Arts addition, which is a preliminary massing model that we will continue to develop as we move through. And we've also completed our schematic design, building code review, and assessment. Turn it over to Sean.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to meet everybody tonight, so thank you very much for having us. I'll give you a little update on where we are with the design of the Performing Arts Edition and related components to the project. Since we last met, the project has developed significantly, and we have a breakdown of the kind of program that has not changed significantly in and of itself. We have added in the motorized rigging for the stage equipment that is asked of us. But I have on the right what the layout looked like the last time we met with you. And the significant takeaway is at that time we had pretty much a one-story addition with entering in through kind of between the administrative and guidance areas, and then at the same level as the auditorium, which would then connect down to the lower house. However, we have developed with the civil engineers, after receiving the site surveys, the concept that you see on the screen now, which has changed a little bit from that previous plan in that you're walking in at a level, again, between the guidance and administrative areas, but you're on the same level as the existing auditorium to be the cafeteria in the future. That's also at the track level of the existing gymnasium. But from then, at that point, you would go down one level to the new auditorium level, which then, again, connects to the lower house. So we effectively moved the administrative areas up one floor, and then all of the other components, including the 1,200-person capacity auditorium and all the performing arts ancillary spaces, band, chorus, orchestra, and so on this level. And then that connects to the existing lower house with a little bit of a kind of replacement construction in this area. That's due to code matters that John alluded to earlier we've been working out. So what does that look like? This will give you a little bit of an idea from a massing standpoint. After you walk in the new main entrance, you'll be up one level from the main auditorium lobby that you see here. So that gives a pretty dynamic perspective as you enter the area. So you'll see where you'll be going for performance nights, and then you would go around to those stairs as I showed you previously to get to that area. We've also worked in a concept with the balcony in the auditorium, which is directly overhead here, and then the new stairways and access to those balconies feeds directly to that same lobby, so everybody would be going to the same place to access any performance or activity in the auditorium. This is a massing from the exterior that we're continuing to develop, so you can see the relationship of the new addition and the existing upper house here. There's the gymnasium, and then the lower house is behind it, so you can see the addition kind of situated right between them, and that helps link the two buildings. So that's where we're at right now as far as the massing on the outside. And given the site grading that is there, we're looking to do something pretty dynamic to accentuate the new main entrance to the high school. So this is a look at the existing auditorium to be converted to new cafeteria with the kitchen addition. So this is, you probably recognize the existing auditorium space, And then we're putting on a modest addition in the back to accommodate the new kitchen. As you can see there, we have developed that kitchen and food court arrangement pretty significantly to this point. So we're moving along well with that aspect as well. In the lower house, this is a slide that you saw last time. I'm bringing it up just to remind you of what we were looking at that point, where we had the existing cafeteria area as an alternate space, as well as some classrooms and administrative areas to be renovated as well. To some degree, we still have that in our plans at this time, but otherwise, we're looking to do repurposing of this area, the existing administrative area, to convert them to classrooms. And otherwise, under the base bid, we'll be doing a full HVAC equipment replacement to serve the lower house. To give you an idea of, to kind of clean that up to where we're at today, here's that existing cafeteria area that would be under an alternate bid converted to science labs. And then adjacent to that, the currently existing art suite that under a separate alternate bid would be converted to tech ed suite. And then these are the converted classrooms that are currently administrative areas. Those are under the base bid with the addition of the performing arts addition. And then this is actually the existing music suite that is going to be converted under an alternate bid to the art suite. That's right around the corner from the cafeteria and food court, which you see a glimpse of there. What I would like to draw your attention to are some of the estimated costs of these alternates. The art suite that you see here, we estimate about $1.4 million, as well as the tech ed suite at about $830,000. Those two alternates go hand in hand. The art suite is currently located right here, and in order to do that tech ed alternate, the art alternate would also have to happen. So if you're doing one, you're doing the other as well. And then I point out the estimated cost for the science classrooms alternate at about $1.4 million. Okay. A little bit of progress on the site plan front. Here you can see the existing building is in the lighter gray. There's the lower house. And then you can see where the new addition is going that links both the upper and lower houses. As you can see, there is quite a bit of parking that's being displaced to accommodate the addition. And we are working to replace all of those parking spaces one-to-one throughout the space, or throughout the site, with parking here, right behind the upper house, and some terrace parking over there. What I would like to draw your attention to is there is currently insufficient parking on site as per local ordinance. So we'll be looking to obtain municipal confirmation that we can maintain that existing non-compliant condition. Insofar as with the addition, we're not adding faculty or student capacity. So we're asking them to confirm that we can maintain the existing non-compliant condition while not making it any worse, because we're replacing all of those spots one-to-one. Here you can see an example of some of the interiors layouts that we've been developing. This is a direct result of our meetings with the faculty and staff for the performing arts department. So as an example, here's a chorus room, orchestra room, band room, and then this is the orchestra room. We're going through in great detail, closet by closet, all of the storage areas to find out exactly what each faculty member needs and working that into the plans for them. This is a summary of where we are with the mechanical, electrical, plumbing. We've been working with the facilities director to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of exactly what kind of systems, what manufacturers and so on. You know, standalone systems for the new addition, as well as tying into existing systems in the upper and lower houses. So that's a breakdown of that, and I'll let you read that in more detail on your time afterwards. Leading up to the construction documentation phase, this is where we're looking to go in the near future. We actually have a meeting tomorrow with the IT team, so we're moving on that front. We'll be continuing with the stage design, getting all of the equipment at the stage, seating arrangements, so forth, meeting with township engineers. One of the big tasks that we have ahead of us is land development. So you can see that at this point, item number 6. So we'll be continuing with that as we move into construction documentation and building up your phasing plans. And then we'll continue watching that construction market. We know it's very dynamic and volatile at this time. So we'll be watching that and bid results to evaluate any future impacts that might happen on this project. With that, I'll turn it over to John again.
Thank you. So schedule-wise, this is the same schedule that we have proposed early on. We are now entering the completion of design development early July, and we'll begin overlap of construction documents. But going to bidding is slated for October, and I think because of some of the comments that Sean made, primarily about land development, and also what is happening with the market that we're going to talk in a little bit, we're going to continue to monitor that to try to find the right time to recommend when to go to bid, but there's a little bit of guesswork in that. That's the same as projecting what fuel oil costs will be in 4 months. It's a little bit difficult, but we are receiving bids on projects fairly routinely, every 2 or 3 weeks, fairly large. So we're waiting to see what actual projects cost on bid day. Everybody's trying to project lots of things, but we're actually seeing what are the bid results for projects of similar scope over the next few months. So I'm sure we'll be revisiting this as well. So in terms of market condition, this is a price index that you can see clearly in the last few months. This was not anticipated by anyone. There's a marked increase in material and product delivery. Its availability, you've all read the news about plants that have been closed and not being able to staff them. The availability of material and just getting the actual material in itself is driving the cost up significantly. And we are talking with contractors after other projects have bid. Mannheim Central bid a project in May. Mechanicsburg School District did a high school project, bids early in June. And we're talking to them about what were the things that were so sensitive. In some cases, we've actually designed different structural systems because steel joists cannot be gotten. I think they're going to every Amazon warehouse in the country. So we're looking and listening to what the contractor's saying to try to figure out, are there different things that we can design? And I think Dr. Fadley gets credit for coining
Lean functionality.
Lean functionality. We're trying to figure out what is the smartest way, the most economical way to design the project so that we can give the contractors flexibility on their bidding so that we get better pricing. We'll continue to monitor this, again, and compare not only what is projected, but the trend to actual bid results. This was another item that we thought was very telling that shows the increase over a fairly short period of time in terms of, I mentioned fuel earlier, diesel fuel and asphalt. But when you take a look at copper and steel and lumber, they're fairly significantly high. No one could have projected this, and they will settle down. All of these, this happens, it has happened in the past with natural disasters and all kinds of other things that influence the market. So the question is when, but the takeaway, we certainly didn't want to have this doom and gloom picture. We're continuing to evaluate the scope of work to make sure we align the budget with what the board has approved. So what you've asked us to do is design a $34 million project. We will continue to make suggestions. The administrative team has done that. Jeff Simcox has made those suggestions. So we're all trying to work at what's the smartest solution. That design concept that Sean pointed out, how the admin is at the upper level, was because of the topography. We're trying to utilize the topography there and not over-excavate, create foundation and retaining walls. So we're trying to balance the equity and come up with a creative design solution in the end. So that's what we're trying to do. So that was hopefully quick enough and open if there are any questions or comments anyone has.
I got a question. On the March meeting, we looked at the auditorium size and felt that the 1,200 capacity was low, and I know there was a talk about getting a revision up to 1,500 people. Was that taken a look at?
We did discuss it. I don't know if Dr. Trickett or Dr. Faley want to say from the school's perspective.
That with the conversations that you've had with the performing arts?
So, Mr. Martin, we do have the cost to increase capacity from the 1,200 to the 1,500 student capacity. One of the things that our team of engineers and architects are trying to balance is, as actually Mr. McCrae brought up, what is the parking capacity within our site? So our team, our team of folks in their theater, band, and so forth, our high school principals do believe that 1,200 would meet our needs from a functional capacity. We're currently around 980 students. 1,200 would allow us to bring 2 full classes into that auditorium for class meetings, assemblies, functions within the school. And we also believe that 1,200 would be adequate for our concert series that we have in elementary, middle school, and high school. So, however, with that being said, we do have a budget, an estimated budget to increase to that amount. It would take probably more parking spaces, which could ultimately create other ripples in the plan.
Okay, I just, if you're going to spend that much money, I just don't see the sense of not making it larger. But if that's what the board wants, that's what the board wants.
Yeah, 3 would be a stretch goal. That would be around 1,800 students. I don't know if there's a facility of that size locally. Again, one of the challenges that we can speak to is just the landlocked nature of our site. There's very little acreage for us to park cars.
Right, and one of the things that, and I'll just add, is I've been very on top of Crabtree in terms of not exceeding the established $34 million budget, and that's, in my opinion, is a non-negotiable unless the board wants to adjust that budget. And adding those type of numbers creates an excessive cost escalator for this project. And knowing that the existing performing arts and the conversations that we've had with them, meeting the functionality of what the school needs versus building it larger and spending more dollars, I can't make a recommendation to build something bigger because it also increases the price tag, and we are on a very limited scope here with the budget.
Thank you. That was added.
But we have science labs now, so is there a need for additional science labs?
So the concept that you see in the lower part of our campus, currently called the lower house, is more of a departmentalization of our high school. It's moving our math and science departments into this space. And in order to accommodate that, we would need to relocate those science labs. And we were just kind of going through the vision of what could this space become. So that space is currently the lower house cafeteria, currently in the scope of work is kind of just waiting for us to determine what we want to do with that space. So the proposal that we had as an alternate bid was this idea of a true departmentalization of our math and science folks, aligning then our engineering folks, kind of like a STEM, lower campus, and then more of the humanities, the arts, English, social studies up in the upper campus.
So I'm assuming then that's why the existing art
You got it.
rooms couldn't just stay art rooms and we switch to tech ed and then
Right.
convert them.
And they can stay. These are just other things that we want to continue to look at and review. As bids come in, our plan would be to analyze where we are within the parameters of the budget and to make some decisions and recommendations from there. These rooms are not needed the day that this building opens. We're trying to, again, set up the school and the district for success 10 years down the road.
If I recall, those were just vacant on the last one.
Yes.
If you're going to add 4 million, the cost plus moving the fine arts, so that's about $3.5 million. And that's an increase to 34 million, or is that how's that going to work?
So I'll address that question. So included in the base bid are all of the things that we discussed. The alternate bid is, if you picture it as, these are things that we would like to have if the bids come in lower than we anticipate in the base bid. And let's just say the base bid comes in at 30 million and the alternates are $4 million. We would still be within the scope of the allocated budget for the project. And at that point in time, the board could decide we want to accept the alternate bids as part of the project or not. And given what we have just heard regarding the price escalation in materials, it's highly unlikely that the base bid is going to come in lower than $34 million. However, if it does, it gives the board options. That gives the board an option to improve the school within the confines of the current budget.
I don't have an issue with that thought process, but I would like to see what it would look like to go to 1,500 in the auditorium, I mean, as an alternative.
So looking at adding 300 student capacity to the auditorium as an alternate bid, that would include also changing the architectural design, I would assume, and capturing more space on the footprint of the site, which is doable, but could you bid that as an alternate?
Well, it would, the answer is yes, it could be done. However, it would be, because of sight lines, acoustics, accessibility, code compliance, egress, it would be an entirely different design. It's not like you could just increase the depth of the balcony, for instance. So a design concept could be developed. We could also evaluate whether or not, as Sean mentioned, we're hoping the municipality will grant you the acceptance of the non-compliant parking as it is. Assembly spaces such as auditoriums are usually trigger points for municipal parking. So that could also be another hurdle to clear.
Well, I just envision it to be larger, but once again, I understand what you're saying. I don't have an issue with it, because you sound like that's going to be a major undertaking.
Well, and you know, there's no generally speaking about this, but most districts that wrestle with this do settle in on 2 grades, because even if you have a third, you're still going to repeat a performance or an event anyway. And then you'd have that large facility sitting empty. So it's 2 grades is a pretty good sweet spot. That's what most districts, Dr. Trickett mentioned, that there aren't many 1,800 to 2,000 high school auditoriums for that reason.
All right, thank you.
Well, and you said one of the issues was our already problematic parking conditions. How out of compliance is our parking? Because I know historically we've had lottery systems for parking spots on the campus. So, is it something that's within reason that?
It evades me at the moment, but I can get back to you with that number. It is, as I recall, fairly substantial.
Okay. No, it's okay. I was just thinking, just realistically, if the municipality will be okay with us basically being grandfathered into our current situation.
Well, we're hoping to make the argument that this is the same staff that is here now. It's not a substantial, this is not an increase in classroom capacity. Those band rooms, that orchestra course, all exist. Well, you might not have all those spaces, I shouldn't say that, but in theory, it's your same staff and team here, so that should not in itself trigger the additional parking.
Okay.
But assembly spaces get a lot of scrutiny.
Sean, if you could provide that number,
I absolutely will.
then I can update the board in my weekly update, and they can know what that capacity is.
Will do.
The picture of the inside the Performing Arts Center, when you walk in, you're on a balcony. How large is that balcony? I mean, like if it's wintertime and you have 500 people trying to come in, are they at this short balcony?
It's definitely sized to accommodate a crowd.
Okay.
That you would expect for any performing art.
Can you go back to that slide real quick? That it had a lady.
The actual model or the, yeah, I wanted to show you the footprint. It's fairly substantial in size, and of course, all of that yellow is circulation space on the main level, so those areas are also fairly large.
Okay. There was a picture of the inside with.
Yep, this guy?
Yeah, this one, you're standing pretty much right at the railing.
Yeah, the
So
view's
you're not-
pushing you forward.
You didn't just walk in the door with that
You
picture?
did not just walk in the
Right.
door.
Okay. And that person walking upstairs, you're walking downstairs and then back upstairs? That person on those steps in there?
Oh, to the
Seems-
balcony.
Seems a lot of steps.
There are a handful of steps, yes. A lot of that is the direct result of the topography that we're facing to accomplish this. We have looked at other options to get to the balcony that include ways around kind of to the left and then kind of extended platforms, kind of all the way around that open space. That was a decision we made because we felt that it was more important that everybody convenes in the same lobby, comes to the same place before and after performances, rather than having to send, there's an optics matter of having to send anybody, say at the balcony, some completely different pathway to get to it. So the auditorium being situated at the floor level that it is a direct result of the topography. And we made the decision to have those stairs like that so that everybody's convening at the same place on the event night.
So
But again-
ADA-wise, and is there going to be an elevator?
From ADA standpoint, we are permitted up to 280 persons in the balcony without needing an elevator. And I believe that's approximately a third of the size of the downstairs with some other factors worked in as well.
But there is a new elevator in the project. It just is not required. We didn't want to design, because of cost, to have an elevator just to service the balcony. So there were some other, other things that factor into it as well.
So from an ADA perspective, of course, downstairs in the auditorium will meet all of the requirements for ADA seating positions.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's you. Sorry.
President Hart, next part of the agenda has to do with the presentation on our updated school district health and safety plan that we will be bringing to the board for consideration at our next board meeting. Dr. Hoffert has a short presentation to go through the key points of this presentation, and we will also be available to answer any board member questions pertaining to this plan at the conclusion of his presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Fadley, Mr. Hart. Yeah, as Dr. Fadley said, I'm just going to present very briefly some of the highlights of what we're proposing for our new health and safety plan. This is part of a required step by PDE for us to consider mitigation strategies leading to the beginning of the next school year. They provided us with a template and some guidelines to follow in the creation of the plan. And I'll explain kind of what the next steps are at the conclusion of this presentation. But just a bit of history here. Our original health and safety plan, which we've been following for the past school year, was developed in a team approach consisting of a number of different individuals from across the district. We incorporated data from a survey that was conducted over the summer and I believe again in the fall to gain some additional information from our community about their feedback on the plan, as well as the guidelines that were provided from the Department of Education, the CDC, American Academy of Pediatrics, our local physicians, and a number of different groups that provided some expertise. That plan, again, was designed to be flexible, and it provided our district the opportunity, like it says there, to just adjust and shift as we learn new things about the pandemic. This was kind of a novel experience for everyone. So it was an opportunity to implement some strategies to learn along the way. And now, as we're preparing for the start of the fall, it's hard to believe we're saying that in June, but we are preparing for August. We're going to take what we've learned and apply that to our new plan. So just a couple of things about what the new plan requirements are. We do need to submit our plan by July 30th to PDE, and that's a requirement for any districts that have received Title 1A funds in the 2020-21 school year and who plan to apply for the ARP ESSER 3 grant fund. That's the third phase of grant funding through ESSER and now through ARP. It is customized to meet local needs and contexts, so they gave us some rough guidelines to follow. But much of the plan is left to local control. And that's kind of the word that we've bandied about through this entire process, local control, local control. So there are things that we have some control over that we can put into the plan and consider based on our experience implementing our previous plan. It does need to be reviewed and revised if necessary, but at least reviewed every 6 months. And then it does need to be revised if the CDC comes out and makes any significant changes to the recommendations for schools. So some of the required components, we need to consider how we're going to implement prevention and mitigation policies in line with guidance from agencies like CDC. We need to consider how we're going to ensure continuity of services over that time, whether that's academics, mental health, social, emotional, how are we going to address those needs. And then third, how are we going to maintain the health and safety of students and educators addressing the following strategies? And there were a number of categories that were provided in the template that we needed to address specifically, including masks, distancing, hygiene, cleaning, contact tracing, and quarantining, testing, vaccinations, accommodations, and then continuing to coordinate with state and local officials. So what I'm going to do is kind of walk through some of our ideas about each of these questions, concluding with some of the specifics in that last category to address our proposed plan. So first, how will we implement prevention and mitigation policies? Again, the CDC and the Pennsylvania Department of Health guidelines were used to establish that initial plan for last school year. And our plan is to take a look at that initial plan and all the strategies we put in place and identify those strategies that were both practical and effective in mitigating the virus and the spread of the virus in our schools. And then we'll apply those strategies to the new plan. So how will we provide or ensure continuity of services? Again, our goal through this plan is to offer full in-person instruction, providing consistent access for all of our students and a full complement of district services and programs. Continue to utilize the materials and equipment that we gained in preparation for our 2021 opening to continue implementing those strategies to allow for students access throughout their day and throughout their week, both in the area of facilities management, but also in instructional delivery. And then finally, we just plan to continue to utilize some of that expanded funding through ESSER, as I mentioned before, and also the USDA to ensure students have access to those programs and services that they need. And finally, the third category just talks about how we plan to maintain the health and safety of our students following the mitigation strategies. And this is where we leaned on our learning from the previous year's plan to identify some strategies to address each of the areas that were outlined in the template. So I kind of bulleted out and tried to pull some of the highlights, but we are going to provide the full document for you to review tomorrow on the website. We'll email it out to you guys as well so you can check that out. But as of June 28th, the universal masking order in Pennsylvania has been lifted or will be lifted regardless of vaccination status. So the district will continue to recommend face coverings for unvaccinated students and staff when physical distancing is not possible, but that will be optional according to this draft plan. Obviously, we're going to continue to follow the current governor's order regarding masking for individuals based on that vaccination status. So if something does change, we need to revert back to the requirement on the part of the governor's office, then we'll consider that as part of our revision. Again, I just kind of touched on some of the modifications to our facilities and physical distancing. We're going to continue to encourage 3 to 6 feet of distance between individuals whenever possible. Obviously, coming back full in person, that's going to be more of a challenge than it was with our reduced capacities. But if you look at our elementary schools who were primarily back full in person with some remote sections, we're going to be working to continue to try and reduce our class sizes as much as possible across those settings. We're going to continue, as you can see highlighted there, we're going to continue with some of our modifications to the schedules, such as our staggered dismissal times, the open campus concept on the high school as much as possible. We're going to try and limit small group instruction in close quarters whenever possible. So again, just trying to borrow from what we've learned over this past school year. We needed to address, obviously, hand washing and respiratory etiquette. That's the buzz phrase that we're using now for coughing into your elbow. But we are, continuing to encourage students and staff and remind them to wash their hands frequently. We'll have signage throughout our buildings, continue to provide hand sanitizer stations, and just teaching and reminding students and staff about coughing and sneezing etiquette. Under cleaning and sanitization, we're going to maintain our increased frequency of cleaning routines in our building spaces and high-touch areas. We're going to continue with our sanitization process. We do still have the equipment and machinery that are necessary to sanitize an area if we do have an infection in a classroom space. As far as contact tracing, isolation, and quarantine, the guidance we've received, number one, we're going to continue to do our temperature checks on the way into school. We have the equipment and the ability to do that. That's something that we can maintain. We will follow the required reporting process for all communicable diseases. This is a little bit of a shift, but the standard practice for our nurses when encountering a communicable disease is to contact the State Department of Health, seek guidance from them, and then provide that information to families. So we're going to continue with that, just as we would for any other communicable disease. And if the guidance shifts or something changes along the way, specific to COVID, we can again revise that plan. As far as diagnostic screening and testing, this is something that we have been approached by a couple of different outside companies that want to provide us with tests to do in-house for students or staff who may be experiencing symptoms. Not something we were necessarily ready to embark on, but there has been some communication with the Department of Health about serving as a site where a third-party company might be able to come in and provide that as a service or do some screening and testing as a tool to determine the level of spread in a community. So that's something we'll continue to talk with the Department of Health about, but it's not something we're ready to commit our nurses to providing on site at this point. But we will obviously continue to follow our protocols when it comes to how we handle an infected student or staff member within the building. Again, we're also asked to address our efforts to provide vaccines to the school community. Again, not something as a school district that we want to take on as our responsibility to vaccinate the community, but we will certainly continue to communicate out any of those opportunities that become available within the community. We've had a number of providers that have offered to provide clinics, whether it's in our buildings or in local other venues, that we'll continue to communicate that out to our school community to provide them with as much information as possible. We're asked to consider accommodations for students with disabilities when it comes to the health and safety plan. Again, we'll be implementing our universal protocols as described before. Our goal is to ensure the safety of our students and to offer alternative options as needed, obviously relaxing requirements for certain situations where a student may not be able to maintain all of the mitigation strategies that we've proposed. And then finally, the last section just asks us to continue to coordinate with state and local health officials. This becomes a little more difficult in Berks County where we don't have our own health department. There are other counties that have pretty vast health departments and they've had much more communication, but we will continue to maintain our ties with the Berks County Intermediate Unit as a point of contact, and also our contacts with the State Department of Health, who we've become very friendly with over the past year. So they will definitely be reaching out to us and us to them. So next steps, as I mentioned, our plan for tomorrow will be to place the full draft of this template. I actually think I have more slides than pages to the template itself, but we will post that draft on the website for the community to see. Our plan is to send out a survey very similar to the survey that we did last school year or last summer in preparation for the school year to gain some community feedback based on the proposed plan. Our goal is to at the July 21st, which is our next board meeting, have the finalized plan with any additional revisions on the agenda for approval, and then we'll be able to submit that by July 30th through the PDE eGrants portal, which is the venue that we've been asked to submit the plan in. So that's all I have. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Yeah, I hate to ask this question, but the rest of the world, the United States is moving on and going away from everything. The schools are least impacted, the children are least impacted by the virus. Why are we like still in the Stone Age when everything else is open?
Well, Mr. Martin, we've been given a template and some instructions and some guidance that we need to follow in order to submit our plan.
I do
We've been asked to
understand
follow
that,
those. So.
But there's, once again, I don't want to talk out of line here, but these are recommendations, they're not rules. There's no punishment if you don't follow those. It's a recommendation because effective with June 28th, actually I believe effective today on the 11th, the governor's powers to implement certain things has gone away, but that's neither here nor there. The thing is, the least impacted people are the children, and we're imposing upon them the most difficult. More people commit suicide in Pennsylvania. 10 times more people commit suicide in Pennsylvania than they died from COVID in the under 17. I'm not taking it on you, but I don't really care what some of these people say. I don't really care.
Well, and as I mentioned, this plan is to implement a full return to in-person instruction. So I believe the strategies that we've put in place, and again, as I mentioned, we've kind of learned from what we did over the past school year. The goal is to create as little imposition as possible while still maintaining some of the measures that are recommended by the state.
I mean, once again, I agree with the hygiene part. I mean, that's good for all viruses. This is never going to go away. I mean, no matter what you want, it's always going to be a virus. And I think I like 80% of that, but and I'll get back to you on the 20%.
Well, this is a draft, so I'm willing to look at any
Okay.
recommended revisions that you have
so
over the next month.
I'll give you a B.
We've got a month to. I appreciate that. I do.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Martin. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Board met in executive session this evening before the board meeting. 2.1, request approval of the minutes of the school board meeting held on June 7, 2021 as attached. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Martin first, do you have a second? Mr. Schneider, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Treasurer's report, Mr. Martin.
Mr. President, for approval tonight, the Treasury report, the investment report, the general fund report as presented.
We have a first, do you have a second? Mr. Case, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Casper. Yes. Dr. Kennedy.
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker.
Yes.
Mr. Martin.
Yes.
Mr. McCray.
Yes.
Mr. Negrini.
Yes.
Mr. Schneider.
Yes.
Mr. Case.
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
9 yes.
Payment of bills, Mr. Martin.
Payment of bills tonight, out of the general fund, $2,896,986.94. Out of the capital reserve fund, $229,336.81. And out of 2019 A construction fund, $26,418.79.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
McCray.
Mr. McCray, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. McCray. Mr. Negrini.
Yes.
Mr. Schneider.
Yes.
Mr. Case.
Yes.
Mrs. Casper.
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy.
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker.
Yes.
Mr. Martin.
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Financial reports, Ms. Martin.
For approval, these are all for May. The cafeteria report, the child care report, the Southern Middle School, Wilson West Middle School, and the senior high.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Mr. Case, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Cocker.
Yes.
Mr. Martin.
Yes.
Mr. McCray.
Yes.
Mr. Negrini.
Yes.
Mr. Schneider.
Yes.
Mr. Case.
Yes.
Mrs. Casper.
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy.
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Superintendent's report. Dr. Fadley.
Thank you, Mr. President. This evening, I present the personnel and program recommendations for board consideration.
Looking for a motion? Mrs. Cocker first. Do you have a second? Mr. Schneider. Any discussion? Dr. Kennedy?
I just wanted to talk a little bit about something on the school board, on the superintendent's report, as far as resignations. I know that in the past, we've had a lot of resignations. Almost every time we met, we had 2 or 3 people that were resigning. And it always really hurt my heart because I thought, oh my gosh, what's wrong with us? And I want to take a minute to thank Dr. Fadley, Dr. Trickett, Dr. Stout, and all of the new administration, because looking at this year, in the middle of a pandemic, in the most difficult teaching circumstances, we had very, very few resignations. And one of the young ladies on the report is one of my former students. And I am sad that she's resigning, but she's probably dying right now because I told her I was going to vote no. She's a wonderful teacher. I'm so sad she's going. And everybody that called me for a letter of reference, I was like, I wanted to be like, no, she's terrible. You don't want her. But she's not. She's fabulous. She's so fabulous that she got hired in 3 different school districts and had a pick of where she was going. And the only reason that she's resigning is because she wants to be home close to family. And she wants to start her own family. She's getting married in the fall. And I can't begrudge her of that. I understand how hard it is to be away from family. And she was texting me all Friday, and she's sending me her resignation letter. Is this okay? Did I say enough? I think it might have been the nicest resignation letter I've ever read in my whole life. She sent Dr. Fadley an email. And, you know, there was nothing we could do short of, like, teaching her to apparate from Western Pennsylvania to Berks County that could have kept her here. And she was so sad to do it. And I'm so sad to see her go, but I'm so proud to be in this district that is a completely and totally different place to work for than it was just 2 or 3 years ago. And I think we all should be super proud about that. And I you know, congratulations to everybody. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. But are we a whole lot better than we were? 100%. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
We have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Human Resources, 7.1, request approval of Chelsea Hoffman, full-time 12-month behavioral specialist, Act 93, $77,358. 7.2, request approval of the contract between the Wilson School District and the Vision Benefits of America, as presented. 7.3, request approval of the transportation summer rate for bus band aides at $15 per hour. 7.4, request approval of the support staff increases effective July 1st, 2021, as presented. 7.5, request permission to modify distribution under paragraph 5 of Dr. Richard H. Fadley's July 1st, 2020 contract to have that distribution paid into his 403B. Looking for a motion to approve human resource items 7.1 through 7.5 as presented. Mrs. Cocker first, do I have a second? Mrs. Casper, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Student Services, Mrs. Cocker.
Request permission to ratify a contract with Conrad Weiser Decision School for one special education student for the 2020-21 school year at a cost of $216.55 per day, as presented. 8.2, request permission to contract with the Chester County Intermediate Unit to provide a school psychologist as needed for part-time support at a daily rate of $739.64, beginning 6/14/21 and ending 8/17/21. 8.3, request approval of doctors, dentists, and game coverage 2021-2022 is attached. 8.4, request approval of a service agreement with Malvern Academy at a rate of $200 per student per day for the 21-22 school year, beginning 8/25/21 and ending 6/3/22, pending solicitor review and approval. 8.5, request approval to contract with Devereaux Foundation ESY program for one special education student at a cost of $325 per day and a one-on-one service at a cost of $40 per hour, beginning 7/1/2021 and ending 8/17/2021. 8.6, request approval to contract with Bucksmont Academy to guarantee 2 special education slots at a cost of $149.01 per student per day for the 2021-2022 school year, and 2 regular education slots at a cost of $130.06 per student per day for the 2021-2022 school year.
Looking for a motion to approve student services agenda items 8.1 through 8.6 as presented.
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker first. Do you have a second? Dr. Kennedy, any discussion?
How many days are we planning on using the psychologist for the summer? The $739 per day. Seems a bit
Dr.
high.
Hoffert, do you want to address that question?
Can we cap that at something, or is that, I mean, because if it's going to be every day, we might as well hire somebody.
It's not going to be every day. It's as needed based on the number of evaluations that we still need to catch up on. This is part of our catch-up plan, and some of the ESSER money to recover from our closure.
Okay. And the BCIU, I mean, that's a, I don't know, it seems like a high rate for a psychologist.
BCIU didn't have one of that.
Okay. What's the going rate, though? I mean, is it $739 a day?
Typically it's quoted at an hourly rate. Usually, I couldn't quote it.
Okay.
But I can look it up.
Any other questions or discussion? We have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
There it is. 9.1, request to authorize to engage Crabtree, Rohrbach, and Associates to complete the final design and construction phase of architectural services for the comprehensive additions and renovations for the Wilson High School. 9.2, can you hear me? Okay. 9.2, request to contract with services with Power School, formerly Decision Insight, for demographics data collection, not to exceed $17,300, pending solicitor review and approval. Looking for a motion to approve operations agenda items 9.1 and 9.2 as presented. Mr. Negrini first. Do you have a second? Mr. Schneider, any discussion? Martin?
I have a tough one on this one. Decision Insight made significant mistakes when they presented their first presentation to us, or final report. They duplicated some developments, counted houses twice. They used some information I think was not correct, and I would rather see an RFP go out versus just handing this over to them again, because I'm going to go through that report again and double check everything they do. I just don't feel comfortable with them, and that's it.
Any other discussion or comments? We have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper? Yes. Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
Under Finance, 10.1, request approval of the 2021-2022 general fund budget, providing expenditures of $119,900,000 with tax and real estate, 27.66 mils. 10.2, request approval of the tax resolution for the 2021-2022 fiscal year as presented. 10.3, request approval of the homestead and farmstead exclusion resolution for 2021-2022 as presented. 10.4, Request approval of the resolution ratifying tax assessment appeals as presented. 10.5, request approval of the district insurance premiums totaling $673,171 for the 2021-22 school year as recommended by the district insurance broker, Tompkins Insurance, as presented. 10.6, request approval to submit all unpaid 2020 per capita bills to statewide tax recovery subject to payment collected through June 16, 2021. 10.7, request approval of the budget transfers dated May 13, 2021 through June 16, 2021 as attached. Looking for a motion to approve the finance agenda items 10.1 through 10.7 as presented. Dr. Kennedy first. Do I have a second? Mr. Negrini second. Do I have any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schneider? Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
Under Curriculum and Staff Development, 11.1, request to approve the Wilson Summer Learning Camp provided free to students using ESSER funds and to Teacher and Summer Learning Camp Programs Coordinator, as listed. Looking for a motion? Mrs. Casper, do we have a second? Dr. Kennedy, do we have any discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy? Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Food and Cafeteria, 12.1, request approval of the 2021-2022 food services budget in the amount of $2,926,791 as attached. 12.2, request approval of bid awards for the 2021-2022 school year as presented. 12.3, request approval to advertise and solicit bids for the following food service equipment purchases pending solicitor approval. 2 new federal refrigerated self-serve high-profile milk merchandisers for the Southern Middle School. 2 new federal refrigerated self-service high-profile milk merchandisers for Cornwall Terrace. 1 new federal refrigerated self-service high-profile milk merchandiser for Green Valley. Looking for a motion to approve food service agenda items 12.1 through 12.3 as presented.
So moved. Case?
Mr. Case first. Do we have a second?
Schneider.
Mr. Schneider second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Child Care, 13.1, request approval of the 2000 Berkshire Heights Early Learning Center Wilson Child Care budget as attached. 13.2, request approval of the contract with Home Care Solutions LLC for the cleaning of Berkshire Heights Early Learning Center pending solicitor review and approval. Looking for motion to approve child care agenda items 13.1 and 13.2 as presented. Mrs. Cocker first. Do you have a second? Mrs. Casper. In discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under extracurricular, 14.1, request approval of the updated athletics and extracurricular health and safety plan as attached. Looking for a motion? Mrs. Cocker first. Do you have a second? Mr. McCray, any discussion?
President Hart?
Yes, sir. Mr. Negrini.
I'm wondering why we're voting on this tonight and we're deferring the district-wide health and safety plan till our board meeting in July. Obviously, we're talking about a number of weeks between tonight and our next meeting, July 21st, as it addresses a number of issues in the safety plan, which includes face coverings, it includes, the reduced capacity at certain events. And the face coverings talks about guidance from federal, state, local, and PIAA, which seems to be giving various bits of information and standards. I had the privilege of watching some of our finest swimmers qualify for the Olympics in Omaha, sitting in seats with other spectators, not wearing masks, not social distanced. I was at the College World Series watching a game filled to capacity, and yet we're looking at approving tonight an extracurricular health and safety plan that is the complete opposite of what was taking place halfway across the country with some of the finest athletes in the world. So I believe that action on this particular subject should either be deferred as well, or as I indicated, there's some real concerns here with what's in this health and safety plan that will be requirements for some of our student athletes over the next couple of weeks until we make that modification, for what it's worth.
Thank you. Any other discussion or comments?
Actually, it was going to be in my report, but I think it's timely now. At the extracurricular committee meeting where we discussed the changes, the main changes to our current plan, to what we would be approving tonight, are basically just the fact that student athletes currently, before they participate in a sport, have to fill out a half sheet, basically saying that they don't have any COVID symptoms, basically like a self-checklist. That will no longer be required, as well as the waiver that student athletes had to fill out previously. It's my understanding that anything related to masking would also follow the state mandate being lifted on the 28th, as is with any of our other district buildings, which I don't believe is reliant on our updated health and safety plan that we would be approving in July, if that helps answer the question. If it doesn't, I don't know if Dr. Schrickett can speak more to that.
Sure. Mrs. Cucker did a great job explaining the conversation that occurred at the committee meeting. The real intent of this plan is that our prior plan, the intent of that was that it expired at the culmination of the spring season. So the intent of this plan is kind of a stopgap between now and whenever we release our health and safety plan as a school district, or the fall season would begin. And Mrs. Cucker is correct that specifics with the specific requirements regarding masks would follow the state's Department of Health's recommendations, which will be ending, based on my understanding, very soon. Our athletes that are participating in athletics during a competitive environment, practice, training outdoors, they do not wear masks.
When is the first day for fall sports?
It's in mid-August.
Mid-August.
So we do have summer camps going on right now, as well as non-mandatory athletic training. So there are participants pretty much year-round at Wilson.
And they, at this point, hearing you, Dr. Trickett, they are not wearing masks. Is that correct?
Indoor events are currently following the health and safety plan set forth, which does require masks to be worn at all times. Outdoor events, when children are participating, they are not wearing masks. When they're on the sideline or congregating, they currently are.
Any other questions or comments?
Based on my understanding of the governor's direction, that is correct.
Why do we still need this?
That is a conversation for this board to have. Currently, we do not have one. So we're not currently providing guidance to our coaches or our parents, because the intent was to just have that expire. It's not something that is required. We do not have to have this.
Is it something we could table and revisit in July?
They're practicing now.
Yeah, we would just need guidance for our athletic director, our coaches, our athletes, to be able to provide them with what that guidance is. We have summer camps going on indoors this week, so we would need to provide them with direction. And currently that direction is that we're following the guidelines set forth until we reach back out to them with an update. So I would take as not moving forward with this agenda item this evening to interpret that as we're going to continue implementing our current health and safety plan from the school district until a change would come forth.
The intent of this plan is like Mrs. Cocker said.
This is a stopgap. It's also to clarify that when the governor makes the shift on June 28th, that the mask rule disappears.
So why don't we just have this terminate on June 28th?
Well, if I hear correctly, there is not one for student athletes. Is that what you said, Dr. Trickett? There currently isn't one, and we're just,
I mean, we keep talking about June 28th. And if that's the good date, and it is a good date. I mean, I think it's already occurred, but if all this goes away in June 28th, why don't we just do away with it? I mean, why do we keep playing around with stuff?
So I can speak to that. Especially for the summer camps, we have participants that are under the age of 12 participating in these events. And because that age group is not able to be vaccinated yet, I think we need to take things into consideration, especially if there are indoor athletics, which we do currently have for that age group. So we're just making sure that we're, A, following what the Pennsylvania mandates are, and that we are taking all of the health and safety protocols into account. I don't think there's anything in our updated plan that would make anything more restrictive than it is now and isn't going to impede anybody. If anything, it's just keeping the protocols of if we have a student that has a positive case, what the steps are, and that it's basically what we've been doing before. We're just taking away the reporting forms the students have to complete. And then we're following state guidelines after that. I don't think there's anything in this plan that is harming children in any way, Mr. Martin.
Thank you.
Yep. To Mr. Trickett's, we don't have one. So if we don't have one, why do we need to have one? And to Mr. Negrini's point, if we put ours off for the health and safety plan for the district off until July 21st, I understand we need guidance for this fall, but we also have students in school, summer school, before July 21st. So why do we need to approve this? I understand we need to give guidance, but can we give guidance outside of this, since the mandate from the government ends June 28th? Do we need to approve this and before we approve one for the district?
I didn't think our former policy for extracurricular expired at any time. That was perpetual, right, until we changed it. So I don't think we need a stopgap. I mean, if on the 28th, if that's the magic date at this time, you don't need two policies for the same thing, in my opinion.
The only point I would clarify is if we continue with the current athletics and extracurricular health and safety plan, it is more restrictive than this one. Therefore, my recommendation would be that we follow that one, which means we're doing the screening forms, which means we're doing the self-checks, the parent signatures. Those things are challenging in summer. A lot of our parents aren't home during the school day when children come in for their training sessions. So again, just to reiterate, nothing was added to this, things were only taken away. And it aligns very clearly with the mask. The masking expectations do default back to the Pennsylvania Department of Health, which based on, again, all of our understanding, whether it's the 28th or not, very soon, those requirements will no longer be in place.
You have a child that's going to basketball camp, and the mom walks in and nobody's wearing a mask, and that mom has a nervous breakdown. If we don't have a document that says we're following the PD guidelines, then we don't have anything to tell that mom. So, but this way you can say, I'm following what my school district said to do. I think it gives our coaches power to say, we are not required to have masks according to Pennsylvania, and according to CDC or whatever, according to this document. I think giving our coaches guidelines is helpful. And our summer school teachers.
We don't need there's no rule, there's no reason to have a policy. It's gone. It's gone.
And I think that's up to the board to discuss if that is necessary.
This one and move on, I mean, right? If we
Well, there is no policy for athletics.
The intent, whether it's policy or not, the intent of the health and safety plan for athletics and extracurriculars was that it would expire at the end of this spring season. So based on the work we've done as a committee, we currently do not have one. However, we did just have basketball camp last week for our youth, and we did enforce the expectations set forth in this proposed plan.
So let's just let it die.
So, Mr. Martin, what do you expect to have set in place for the organizations and the groups that are having activities for the rest of the summer then?
Well, you don't need anything. According to the government, you don't need anything. We're creating something that doesn't need to be created. If your child, your son or daughter doesn't want to get the vaccination, so be it, but it doesn't impact the kids.
Mr. Martin, that is not, I really wish you would please stop saying that it doesn't impact the kids. Their children are still getting sick. If you're talking about the death rate, that's fine. I agree that the children are not hospitalized or have not had a high death rate like in other age groups. But I would really appreciate if you stop saying that it's not affecting them.
Okay,
because children are still getting sick. We just got an email yesterday.
You're right. So it's just like any other virus, though. Every child's going to get sick, and I get that. But this is a policy that's not needed, it's not warranted, and there's no need for it. I mean, the CDC doesn't say you need it. The government, well, it doesn't matter what the government says anymore. But it doesn't matter. I mean, I read the bill tonight. Before I came here, I read what the Senate and the House passed. And basically, whether it's the 28th or whether it's yesterday or today, it doesn't really matter. But it all goes away, everything. And I just don't see how, it's like useless rules weaken the necessary ones. This is a useless rule. It signifies nothing.
Amen.
Dr. Trickett, you had mentioned things would be more strict if we did not approve this, but after hearing Mr. Martin, if there's no guidance of what to do other than what will this put into place by?
I would need clarification from the board in regards to the expectations for our indoor sports camps, our indoor sports practices moving forward for our youth, first grade, all the way through our 12th graders. I would need that guidance. Again, our responsibility is to provide an environment where we keep students safe and following CDC, Department of Health, Pennsylvania Department of Education. That's all of the interpretation that occurs on a daily basis in this district.
But real quick, what's the difference between our students who are in summer camps for academics or class makeup work? I mean, why don't we're not passing that until July 21st. Why are we passing this now?
There's equipment cleaning in there, there's sharing the equipment.
There is.
It's all stuff that doesn't apply to academics. Am I correct?
Yes, yeah. These are situations where children would be in close proximity, touching each other, high respiration rates. It's not the same as being in a classroom.
So
Wrestling.
just to clarify, I just want to clarify for everyone the date of June 28th, the communication came in official memo from the Secretary of Education and in a separate memo from the Department of Health at the direction of the governor's office, based on when the mask rule would be lifted, and that is not going to occur until June 28th. So part of this is to, when we use the word stopgap, is to give us some direction for our indoor camps for the next week.
Couple of
So
weeks.
let's approve it, extend it to the 28th. And then it goes away.
It's not, but you understand, it's not just the mask that's
No,
in this
I
plan.
understand that, but I understand that, but it's not, it's not needed. There's nothing left. It's
We're
gone.
still going to, just out of good hygiene and good practice, we're still going to do the mitigation to sanitize the equipment that students are using in these camps, because it is
fine.
best practice.
That's fine.
So if the issue has to do with whether or not students are wearing masks the rest of the summer, whether it's in the classroom or on the in the athletic gym or whatever the case might be, that question has been answered for us by the state. That will end on June 28th. We're basically talking about this week.
And that's what I
So
just said.
that's why it's here.
We'll extend it to July 1st. Then it goes away. If you're concerned about this week, just extend it.
Yeah,
And the health and safety plan, everything is going to be clean.
Filling out too many forms. If we do this, we do less work.
It's not needed.
I know but that's what this plan is saying, that none of that is needed.
So just to clarify, I just want to clarify, just so everybody has, I think we're all on different pages here. So our current health and safety plan, which we're operating under, is much more restrictive than what we're saying we want this new athletic interim plan to be, until the board comes to a final decision for the plan for the fall, which is the one we must submit to the state.
That we will vote on July 21st, correct? That we vote on July 21st, as long as we meet the deadline by July 30th, correct?
That's correct.
It's really not necessary unless there would be some scrimmages or inter-team type events. We do not charge admission to any of those contests. It also is in there in the event that we would decide to rent our facilities, so an outside vendor. Based on my understanding, we're not engaging in that right now for the summer. So it's really just a protection for the school district, so we could say that there still is reduced capacity. Because parents, it wouldn't affect our parents this summer during summer optional practices.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if we approve this tonight, masks go away and screening forms go away.
Screening forms will go away immediately. They are no longer part of this plan. The verbiage in regards to masks is that we would follow the Department of Health, CDC
Which
guidelines.
on the 28th will go away.
Which on the 28th, it goes away. Yep.
Other than an extra policy, I mean, this gets us where we need to be, at least for the 28th. We could have that argument all day long.
But why
It's
do you have a
double-
policy when there's no, it's like you create a solution for something that doesn't exist.
We could argue about it. I mean, it's a temporary,
It's a health and safety plan like.
I'm just trying to be practical.
The same health and safety plan we're going to have to approve for the next school year. So if you're saying that everything goes away now, we are going to have to approve a health and safety plan for all of next school year as well. The health and safety plan is something to provide structure for our employees and our coaches and our athletes so they follow the orders, the cleanings that we need to do, and anything else that needs to be in place. If you're mostly concerned about the masks, that is out of our jurisdiction.
No, I'm concerned about a useless rule that signifies, it has no bearing on anything.
It's not it's a plan, and if you've read the plan, it just answers things like cleaning the gyms, if they're allowed to practice inside, and change inside the gyms, cleaning the equipment.
We probably have 10 more useless rules that we talk about tonight if we go through the manual. I mean, can we be practical and move on?
If your common sense needs to prevail, you don't create a situation that doesn't exist. We create something that doesn't exist.
We've had discussion. There's a motion and second on the floor for 14.1. Looking for a roll call, please.
Mr. Martin?
I'm sorry?
Oh, we're taking roll call.
No, I'm sorry.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
No.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper? Sorry, I apologize, Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
2 no, 7 yes.
So let me ask you, so people don't, there's no enforcement of this policy. You can't enforce it because it's not a rule.
The health and safety plan is not a policy.
Under policies, we have no policies being discussed or voted on this evening. Under miscellaneous, just request to approve the policy maintenance agreement as attached. 16.2, enrollment report. Looking for a motion. Mrs. Casper first. Do we have a second? Mr. McCray, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under committees, Berks Career and Technology Center, Mrs. Casper.
We have not met. Our next meeting is this Wednesday, the 23rd.
Thank you. 17.2, Wilson Equity Task Force, Mrs. Casper.
Yes, we also have not met. I'm not sure when our next meeting is, but I have no report.
Okay. Berks County IU, Dr. Kennedy.
Yes, the BCIU met last Thursday. They had talked about 2 sets of graduates, one in their PALS program, the Preparation for Adult Life program, and also graduates from their Project Search, which is interns. They also, as we just did, updated, or they're actually a step ahead of us, they updated their whole safety plan, and they are calling it the BCIU Health Plus Safety Plan, Organizational Standards and Expectations. They, at the, their school learning academy at Thomas Ford, they started a place for the students to get clothing if they need it, and also they have washers and dryers, and they are calling it the closet, and it's a beautiful mosaic of different things that the kids need. The last thing that they talked about, well, not the last thing, but one of the other things that they talked about is their summer hours are changing at the BCIU, and that's about it.
Berks, I'm sorry, Curriculum Committee, Dr. Kennedy.
The curriculum committee has not met, and we are not scheduled to meet until the start of the next school year.
Berks CIT, Mr. Schlossman.
We have a meeting this Thursday, June 23rd.
Great. Extracurricular, Mrs. Cocker.
We had a meeting last Monday at noon, and the basic conversation was about the health and safety plan, and for further discussion, see our previous 15 minutes. Thank you.
Facilities, Mr. Negrini.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. We met on June 14th. We discussed the Little Cuckoozing Creek Habitat Restoration Project that is moving forward. There's a very small portion of district land that encompasses that project that is not a cost to the district that we're working with the Berks County Conservation District. We discussed the turf grooming, GMAX testing, and slight repairs of turf at Gursky and George Mack Field. The life expectancy of the turf, because of the way we've been able to maintain it, is going to exceed the 10 years that was initially projected for that, so that gives us some additional time to roll in some money as we budget for potential turf replacement every 10 years. We got some updates on construction projects at the Natatorium, the upper house roof, the lower house roof, and the west track. Everything appears to be moving as scheduled and is expected to be finished prior to the start of the school year. Some updates on playground upgrades at Whitfield and Cornwall Terrace, and we got an update on the baseball and softball field projects, some slight modifications of how the softball field will be facing now from home plate out to Van Reed Road, and where the initial press box, where it was going to be one facing both the softball field and the baseball field, actually did not end up working out from a design standpoint, and for the same amount of money to have two separate smaller ones, one for softball and one for baseball. And that's my report.
Thank you. Finance, Mr. Martin.
I just want to thank Christine and her staff for doing a yeomanship job on the budget. Although I'm not completely satisfied with it, kudos for that group. And that's it.
Legislative, Mr. Martin.
Well, as you know, the big thing right now is the budget in Harrisburg. And the problem is they're trying to figure out how to spend $10 billion in windfall money from the federal government, as well as excess revenues above and beyond the budget they anticipated due to COVID. So there's a lot of people vying for this money. Some people are saying put it aside for, not all of it, but put it aside for a rainy day. Others are saying, let's spend it, distribute it to all on a fair share across the state. But I have a suggestion. We take $5 billion, put it to the $34 billion unfunded pension liability, and then work on the other $5 billion for something else. But that would help all the taxpayers across the estate if they put $5 billion to the unfunded balance. Just another item of interest, and this is solely of interest. It doesn't really pertain to school, but excuse me. There's a couple of laws being presented for voting in the next coming year, and it's pretty interesting. It's all following, partisan lines, except for one that was more of a partisan approach to fixing the mail situation with voting, establishing real timelines for reporting of results, and so that what got bipartisan support. And one other thing I like was if it passes, there's going to be a referendum come November on whether the voters believe that they should carry identification with them for voting or not. So that will be coming through the State House and Senate shortly. That's it.
Thank you. Human Resources, no report. Public Relations, Mrs. Troutman.
Good evening. Well, even though our students are currently not in school, they are still having a lot of great accolades, and I wanted to share two things with you this evening that we're super proud of. First, each year, high schools in Berks County are invited to nominate up to 2 seniors in 11 categories to honor their most promising students in the Reading Eagles Berks Best program. So we are very excited to announce that 2 of our Wilson seniors received top honors in the program, in addition to 3 who were selected as finalists. So first, Cole Shimoleski was named the Berks Best winner for computer science. Cole will study mechanical engineering, robotics, and computer science at the Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology. And Luke Heilman was named the Berks Best winner for social studies. Luke will further his studies of history when he attends Dickinson College this fall with the eventual goal of becoming a history professor. In addition, Wilson seniors who were selected as finalists included Anna Gutzler for performing arts, Amaya Shaw for science and environmental studies, and Sanchita Busari for community service. So we just really want to congratulate these outstanding students on being recognized among the best in Berks this year. Also, the BCIU is gearing up to hold its 7th annual Core Connections Instruction and Technology Conference, and to prepare, the Core Connections Conference team hosted 2 student competitions, a t-shirt design, a logo design contest, as well as a Core Connection video competition. There were 70 entries submitted for the t-shirt logo design competition and 30 video submissions for the Core Connection student video competition. And we are very pleased to announce that 9th grade student Ella Perlsley placed 2nd, and 10th grade student Ava Schnorr placed 3rd in the logo design competition. And Southern Middle School 8th grade student Sindora Shradhar placed 2nd in the video competition for her video honoring gifted education teacher Shelley Campbell. So we just want to congratulate these outstanding students here at the Wilson School District. Thank you.
Thank you. Education Foundation, Mr. Case.
No report.
Technology, Mr. Schneider.
No report.
Do not have student outreach. I need. Don't need to authorize you to have employment offers. Don't need to authorize you to make employment offers. And I'll pick back and forth. Sorry about that. Mr. Maravich.
Just no report, but I can read the public comment if that's in order. Rules of public participation at school board meetings pursuant to Sunshine Law, Robert's Rules, and board policy. Following are the rules of public participation. Individuals attending this meeting are expected to conduct themselves in a responsible and respectful manner that does not disrupt the meeting. Public comment is not question and answer, but instead is an opportunity to offer comment on matters that are or may come before the board. Any comments must be directed to the board as a body and not to any individual board member or administrator. Clapping, calling out, or cheering is not permitted, nor are conversations from the audience permitted. Individuals may not approach the board table or the individual board tables, but should speak from the speaker's lectern. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per individual. I will give a warning at 1 minute, and then the buzzer will go off when the time is up. Any person making threats of any type, personal, offensive, impertinent matter, or any person becoming unruly may be removed from the meeting. The above expectations are outlined in Board Policy 903, which is on the board's website under the board docs.
Thank you. Mrs. Cocker.
Christopher Sullivan, Curriculum and Athletics.
Okay, so I just have some thoughts about the curriculum and athletics. Curriculum, there's a lot of stuff being talked about, and I don't actually know how it's being applied here in terms of this 16-19 project. And it just seems like very poor history. It doesn't seem to validate the good things for the United States. We took a Pledge of Allegiance right before this meeting, so I guess that's some kind of consensus that the American flag and patriotism is a good thing. And also in terms of athletics, Wilson has a great athletics program. I know there's a lot of controversy about trans students in athletics in terms of making the playing field fair, given that men and women do have different strengths and different body types. And I would just hope that that trans students would not be able to participate in female sports. I think that could be a big issue.
Thank you.
Okay, Randall Blatt, PMP 823.
Good evening again.
Good evening.
Thanks for allowing me to speak. I'm a little disappointed in one thing. If I ask a yes/no question, will you answer it?
We cannot answer that, I'm sorry. We'll direct that to the
I
superintendent to
don't-
reach out to you afterwards, though.
Okay. First question is Equity Committee. When are you going to meet? During the summer? Yes or no? Or don't you know?
You can follow up with the superintendent's office for that
What?
direction. You can follow up with the superintendent's office, or they'll follow up with you tomorrow. We don't interact with yes or no questions or anything to the board at this time, so I do apologize. But please direct those
Okay,
questions.
so when can I expect an answer? Within a
All
week?
the committee meetings are posted on the website. They're all there. All the committee meetings are posted when they meet.
Yeah, I understand that, but it's a simple question.
I
Are you
believe
going to
the
meet
report
during
already,
the summer?
the report already said that there isn't a currently scheduled meeting.
I did not hear that.
That was direct.
Okay. If you do, I would appreciate the fact that you change it to 7 p.m. instead of 3 p.m. when more people can attend from the public. Okay? Do you know any of the expenses regarding the equity policy? Has anybody factored expenses in, especially for the audit? No? Yes? Will I get answers to these questions?
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
I'd be glad to follow up or have one of my staff members follow up to all of his yes/no questions tomorrow. But as this is a public comment period and not a public conversation with the board, I think it would be best if he could just share those with me after the meeting. And if they are yes/no questions that you want answers to, we will follow up with you tomorrow.
Perfect. Thank you. Since the teachers knew about this new equity thing in January, why did you wait till May to get the public involved? Okay? That's a simple question. And there were some interesting
1 minute.
discussions. Am I?
1 minute, yeah, and I
Yeah,
reset you
this'll
for when
be
Dr.
quick.
Faley spoke.
Okay. Interesting questions. I remind you all that smart men and women know when to make the rules. Wise men and women know when to break them. Okay? And I end with Wilson is a great school. Academics, sports, extracurricular. Ask the realtors. They want to come here. I never heard of a coach, a teacher, administrator being biased at all in this school district. That's why people want to come here. We open them with welcome arms. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blatt.
Dwight Wegman, Policy 832.
Good evening to the board. Thanks for taking our comments again. I'll just say I'm Dwight Wegman. I was here a couple weeks ago to express my objections over the current proposed equity policy 8.32. And before I get into specifics about the policy, I'll just say it is fundamentally flawed, it is divisive, it is toxic. And therefore I recommend to the entire board that it be scrapped, not even brought to a vote. But to go into the specifics, if you read it, it's pretty detailed and comprehensive, but it's very vague on specifics until you get to the equity committee, who would be setting the policy as I understand it. There, the representation is board members, administrators, students, staff, and community members. But my question is, where are the parents? Where are the parents? I cannot believe that you, Dr. Fadley, you, Mrs. Casper, and you, Dr. Kennedy, would bring a policy to this board, to this community, that specifically restricts parents out of the conversation. Now, you might say it's under community members, but why wouldn't you specifically include parents? Are we saying that our parents have no voice in our children's education? That's the message I get.
No comments from the audience, please, while he is speaking.
Then we move on to point 2A, and I read verbatim. The goal is to embed equity, which is really critical race theory, practices throughout the district's educational system. That, to me, says K through 12. Well, that means if you look at how people develop,
1 minute.
we don't develop our critical thinking skills till we're in middle school. So that means for 8 grades, our kids are going to accept whatever the teacher's telling them. And we're talking about indoctrinating, we're talking about social engineering, and that has no place in our education. So, and I think my friend Mr. Blatt, he talked about costs. Are we going to approve a position for director of equity with a staff? Who sets the goals? What happens if the goals aren't met? More spending? It's just fundamentally flawed. And just one other comment, and this is about the expansion. Common sense would say, put off the expansion until the commodity materials come back to normal levels. You're talking millions of dollars to the taxpayer. So just put it off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Richard Hauk, support for the equity policy, support for the school board, support for continuous learning and reflection through observation, science, and reason.
Thank you, board and everyone, for hearing my comments. I'm just here to support the equity policy and for the and to actually support this board in what has been a very difficult past 15 months or more, and also going forward through this with somewhat heated debate. I don't really know why it's a heated debate. I think diversity is a great thing to have. I'm very glad that Wilson is so diverse in its population. And I think, though, that especially being in a school or at the administration building, we should all be looking to further or think in terms of continuous learning. And the only way that you can really learn and grow is to reflect and measure and try to see where you can do better. So I believe that that this is a very valid policy, and thank you for the time that you're putting into it. Thank you.
Jeff Giagnakova, masks 621 versus 628. What do you know about COVID-19, which will override mandate as of 628 if mask policy approved?
Yes, I've got a few other things. So I won't beat the mask thing, but I would ask the board, what exactly is it that you know that will happen 629 and on that would dictate anything other than not saying we wear masks? We began this meeting in the hallway with Dr. Fadley saying you have to wear your mask or you'll be taken out with law enforcement. So I would submit to the board, if you choose to mask our children and our teachers even, on 629 and on, may we threaten you in kind. I also stood before this board 14 months ago about vocational studies. Thank you for highlighting the suicide rate of children 17 and under in Pennsylvania. Our son, 3 years ago, struggled with the same. I left that meeting March of 2020, and I will give credit or understanding, I suppose, where it's due, where obviously March of 2020 brought in a lot of new things for everybody in the room. I'm still waiting for the lunch date to follow up on that meeting. I was blown off after showing up in the lobby. I'm still waiting on that lunch date. That's how your board operates. Your board also operates $119 million in spending, not one discussion. One question on the 21-22 plan. Mr. Martin, I appreciate that one question. On the building budget, as a business owner myself, I have just recently scrapped plans for an addition because my rent would be dictated off of the current market costs. It's untenable. If we're truly to look ahead for the next 10 years, what's one more year or two to get all the alternates, all the great things we really want for our students? As far as this equity plan goes, critical race theory, here's how I see it. As a coach in youth sports in the community, Cub Scouts, et cetera, I see a lot of our kids, a lot of our parents, all types of people, all kinds, getting along. Critical race theory is a top-down approach. If you study the family tree of it, it is nothing but Marxism and evil. You cannot deny that, not one bit.
1 minute.
So it would seem that it's very much a top-down approach on the bottom who are getting along. So I would submit to the board, exactly what is it you seek to divide us about?
Thank you.
Michael Mannix, equity policy.
Good evening. My name is Mike Mannix. I have taught high school physics and other sciences for 20 years, the last 17 at Twin Valley High School. My 3 children have attended Wilson, and I have read the educational equity policy being proposed. If you do a Google image search for equity, you will see a pair of images showing 3 people of different heights reaching for apples on a branch while standing on ladders. In the first image, you see all 3 standing on equal height ladders where the shortest person is nowhere near reaching the apples, and that person is not even trying to grab the apple because of the obvious futility. In the second image, each person stands on a ladder, but the shorter people have taller ladders so that all 3 can reach the apples. There is equal access for unequal participants. This is a basic and fair visual definition of equity. Is the idea of equity possible and appropriate in education? Yes. It has been happening for a long time in our schools already in the form of individual education plans, aka IEPs. For those of you who don't know about IEPs, students with suspected learning disabilities are formally evaluated so that legitimate disabilities can be identified and plans are developed to make it possible for the student to be successful. For example, it is not uncommon for me to give an IEP student a different test than other students based on the directives of that student's IEP. This is an example of education system being altered to accommodate student differences that can be subtle or invisible to the casual observer, yet have profound impact on a student's success. IEPs do not hinder other students, nor have I ever experienced resentment from other students when an accommodation is obvious. IEPs are part of the evolution of education in our country. They make school better for many students. IEPs are an intentional feature of our system designed to provide an equity of possible outcomes for students. It seems reasonable to me that a school would want to hold itself accountable and scrutinize the important facets of its operation to ensure its educational results and legacy are not skewed as a whole at the expense of student groupings based on gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, disability, or other characteristics. The existence of IEPs is proof we all value equity in education and that our schools can implement policies that make school more equitable without harming other students. Our school boards work to address the aspects of equity and the policy being discussed tonight and in the future has precedent in the form of IEPs and potential benefit to current and future students. Development of the equity policy and its procedures must be done with care to be done well. I am sure this community can get it done. Go Bulldogs.
Beverly Hauk, in support of school board.
Apologize for the delay. My name is Beverly Hauk. I am a mother of 3, one recent graduate of Wilson School District. I also have my junior in the audience with a couple of his friends that are also here to support, and my youngest is 13 at Wilson Southern. I actually have one of the unique positions of having students that have both gone to Wilson West and Wilson Southern, which is a conversation in and of itself. I actually want to read from my printed copy because I made sure I actually read this before I decided to speak on it. The authority that it's talking about is the board is committed to the provision of an equitable education system that reflects the principles of fairness and justice for all students, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, English language learners, disability, and other characteristics, as well as the intersection of those characteristics. I'm going to try to be very fast. Several years ago, I was part of a residency at Wilson West, which, as many of us know, is the less diverse school in the district in comparison to Southern as it is. This is an important thing to do. This is several years ago. I don't even know why I held on to these until this moment. But this is what your children said about this. Diversity is good. So the earth won't be made up of mindless clones. And if you're different, Google might make a meme of you. I love diversity because it allows me to have fun. We are all different, and if we had the same things or same personality, wouldn't be able to enjoy things like listening to a specific type of music. I also like it because it lets me be me. Most people bully others without knowing of them. Where's the other? With diversity, people can learn more about cultures, food, religions, etc. You can befriend everyone and help everyone no matter what your difference is. Everybody should be involved, whatever their gender is, personality, race, skin color is, in trying to be awesome. There were also comments like, all the teachers favor the girls, and I don't think it's fair. And also, the teachers like the white girls better. Point of this is that this is an important thing, and I commend you for opening up the conversation. I also commend you for all of your difficult and hard work in a very, very challenging year. Thank you.
Carla Mannix, equity policy.
Good evening. I'm Carla Mannix, and I have a master's degree in English with a concentration in linguistics. So I'm sensitive to the power of words and language to shape a child's reality. I've lived in 4 countries as a U.S. Peace Corps volunteer and a Habitat for Humanity International affiliate developer. So I'm sensitive to the barriers that families who are fighting poverty face in attaining the educational goals of their children. I come tonight because I just want to directly address this idea of critical race theory. I want to caution my neighbors and the board to read scholarly sources when researching critical race theory. It is not a doctrine, it is not a curriculum, it is not a program, and it's not a boogeyman to be scared of. It's an approach of analysis. It's a form of critical thinking that we all agree is part of a good education. It's a framework that has helped legal scholars, historians, administrators, and policymakers analyze the way we operate, that we might explain some of the persistent inequalities that our Black and brown families face. Yes, they have made incredible progress despite the barriers. Students from those families, however, are still frustrated in their pursuit of happiness. It has been helpful to reveal the legal actions and the financial discrimination and the historical events that still affect their lives today. Just the celebration of Juneteenth has indeed been eye-opening for so many people that didn't realize that that happened in history. They're not making up history. They're just telling the history the way it really happened. I think part of the difficulty is that Representative Cox presented an email that was full of inaccuracies. It was full of unsupported opinions from a writer who was trying to generate traffic to his website. It was essentially copied from an opinion essay, and as a composition teacher, I can find plagiarism quite quickly. So I, again, encourage you to read scholarly sources and do your own analysis. What I love about the equity policy that is being proposed tonight is that it is full of verbs where they are not indoctrinating anybody or imposing a philosophy on someone. It is the committee to evaluate policies, to encourage stakeholders to consider equity when making decisions, to enlist the support of experts, to work strategically as a collective body, to offer ongoing education, not force anyone to take it, to provide professional development that fosters the skills, knowledge, and beliefs to cultivate equity. These are all things that we can agree with.
Please wrap
and
up.
we thank you for for doing this great work. Thank you.
Alicia Geiger, masks.
Good evening. My name is Alicia Geiger, and I will be addressing the mask issue. I've just given you several studies showing the lack of efficacy concerning mask use for the mitigation of viral spread. Of course, there will always be those that choose to dispute it, so even if you want to believe the science is inconclusive, let me enlighten you as to what just went down in federal court in Florida concerning the CDC and its mask mandate. The CDC just lost the lawsuit brought against it by the state of Florida, with the judge stating that the CDC is overstepping its authority without any scientific or legal basis. Judge Meredith pressed the CDC to show some evidence to justify the onerous COVID-19 restrictions, critically regarding the CDC's mask requirements. The judge asked, where does this mask efficacy theory come from? We've had masking and social distancing for a long time, and a pandemic in the middle of all that. So if the CDC couldn't defend its mask mandate in federal court, how do you expect to defend any kind of mask mandate for students? I'm asking because it's my intention to hold every one of you, as well as anyone else involved in the making of the unnecessary health and safety plan, personally liable None of you are licensed medical professionals and as such have no authority to mandate health requirements for my or any child. Even if one of you would be a medical doctor, you're not my child's doctor, and you know nothing of him or any of the other students to be making such a call. In a recent report on masks that were worn from 5 to 8 hours and then sent to a lab for testing, detected the following 11 alarmingly dangerous pathogens on the mask. I'm just going to give you the common names: pneumonia, tuberculosis, meningitis, sepsis, pneumonia again.
1 minute.
Food poisoning, Lyme disease, diphtheria, Legionnaire's disease. So half of the masks were contaminated with one or more strains of pneumonia causing bacteria. 1/3 were contaminated with one or more strains of meningitis causing bacteria, and 1/3 were contaminated with dangerous antibiotic-resistant bacterial pathogens. If you're going to put my son's health at risk by forcing him to breathe through a veritable petri dish while at school, or you're not going to do that. Last year, he came home each day after being in school with a headache and fatigue. I know you were all dying to get your hands on that ESSER money, but I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen at the expense of our children's health and well-being. The right thing to do would be to not even submit a health and safety plan at all, allowing everything to go back to normal as every other entity across our and most other states are doing. But if you submit a health and safety plan that includes mandatory masking, each of you will be hearing from my attorney concerning your lack of licensure and authority to give and enforce medical intervention. Again, if the CDC couldn't defend itself in federal court, how do you expect to? You are hereby on notice that you will be held personally responsible and liable for your decisions. Thank you.
Gary W. Rogers, Equity Policy.
President Hart, board members, and Superintendent Fadley. My name is Gary Rogers. I'm a resident and taxpayer of the Wilson School District. I have 3 daughters who have gone to school here for 12 years, and now I have 6 grandchildren, all of whom are in some stage of going through the Wilson School District. I thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you regarding the educational equity policy. One of my concerns, and only one, is that it is written as an equity policy, not an equality policy. Equality is an input orientation. Equity is an output orientation. So you say, what is wrong with being output oriented? Let me give you a very simple scenario. As an equality goal, let's assume that we say that every student needs to participate in a gym class. But our equity goal is that as a result of taking that gym class, all students will qualify to play on the school's football team. All of us sitting here know that no matter how many gym classes we give to some students, and no matter how much assistance we give to those students, they will never be athletic enough to play on the school football team. So what happens? After using our equity lens, as identified in the policy, to evaluate the outcomes of our gym class, it is decided that in order to meet the equity goals, every student must be allowed to play on the football team. So what do you think happens to the quality of that team? Obviously it goes down, because you've lowered the bar for participation, not because you raised the athletic standards of those students. The same will be true for math, science, and your other subjects. Nobody would be concerned about an equality policy, but equity is different.
1 minute.
It's obvious that no matter how many financial resources we devote to public education, we'll never achieve equity outcomes. An equity policy is unrealistic, unattainable. Also, many of us believe that the true intent of an equity policy is to serve as a cover to actually implementing a critical race theory program. A program which is racist by design, has its origins in critical theory, which is a far-left Marxist philosophy, would be harmful to our students and faculty, divisive to the community, and as such, I do not think it will be tolerated by the taxpayers of the Wilson School District. Therefore, I am suggesting that the board and administration rethink, revise, or more appropriately, scrap this policy. Thank you.
Gwen Hill, CRT and no more masks.
Good evening. My name is Gwen Hill. I'm a mother of 4 kids. I have 3 in Wilson. We have 1 little dude who's not ready yet. And one thing that even people in this room that know me don't know is I'm also a proud auntie of 4 kids. And these would be Oliver and Max. They're my brother's children. As you can see that they are Chinese. They're cute kids. Oliver's an authority on Star Wars, by the way. He always gets me. And this is David and Destiny. David and Destiny, actually, David just graduated. He's going into the Marines. As you can see, they are African American. So obviously, our family is very diverse. We don't, you can see that. And we love it. It's great. But I'm just very concerned about your equity policy. And if you go into this critical race theory or any similar program in these schools, that is going to teach children hate. My children don't know hate. They know nothing but love. They've done nothing wrong and nothing but feel love and give love and be accepting of everyone, as my husband and I have taught them to be. Children don't know hate unless you teach it to them, and unfortunately, that's what I feel that CRT or your equity policy will do. I believe in 8 or 9 states have already banned it, and hopefully Pennsylvania will too. But now it's simply not for anyone under 18 years of age. I'm not against diversity or inclusion. I really enjoy it. It's just our lifestyle, but learning about other cultures it's a lot of fun. But unfortunately, your equity policy will not accomplish any of this except for dividing us more. Thank you.
Jody Whitmer, masks, CRT.
Good evening, board. I'm back again to talk about the unmasking. Tonight we heard from the Health and Safety Plan, and I'm still shaking my head over that. I want to thank Mr. Martin for speaking out. I agree that common sense does need to prevail. I'd like to be able to send my kids back in the fall without a mask mandate, but from what was presented, it's saying you're going to recommend face coverings for unvaccinated students. To me, this means that masks are optional and not mandated for any school grade, but that needs to be made more clear. I'm not sure if you've talked to other districts, but I was expecting Wilson to have made a statement out to its residents by now. The ones that have are Wyomissing, Governor Mifflin, Muhlenberg, Daniel Boone, and Twin Valley have all made statements to the residents saying masks are not required for the fall. Many as of already starting that right now. So I don't know why it's been talked about a week waiting and all this stuff. A lot of other districts have started, as of now, no masks required. So I would like the writing to be, in whatever is coming out, instead of recommended face coverings, to be not required. It's my understanding that the Health and Safety Plan does not require mandating universal masking in order to meet the ESSER requirements. Even according to Senator Doug Mastriano, schools will not be punished or withheld funding if they decide the masks are optional in their Health and Safety Plan, even with the ESSER factored in. You can also decide not to do the ESSER funds. You get to make your own decisions, decide whatever you want about the masks and other things. For you to mandate the masks after June 28th is taking away the parental decision of what I think is best for my children. I'm arguing not just against mask mandates, but for freedom. Freedom of choice on behalf of our minors. I'm tired of being told our kids have been okay with masks and that they are resilient. They've been forced to wear these masks, that they are being tested. A concerned mom even went to the extent to get it tested by a lab. They were found to have many things, which I think Allie mentioned, strep and many other bacteria. I was shuddered when I saw the long list of things found on them. The mask can't be good for children's health. So Ms. Cocker, when you said they can't be harmful for children, I disagree with you. Also, when children have colds and allergies and have sneezed or a runny nose inside of them, do you think it's okay for them to be breathing that back in? I know for my own kids, I had them in virtual school partly because of the masking. I did not want to send them back masked. But when they have played sports for Wilson, it's been heartbreaking to see them masked as mandated by this school. Just the other week after a practice, my son commented that it was hard to breathe while wearing the mask at an indoor practice for the past hour. I told him if he feels like he can't breathe well enough, it's okay by me to pull down the mask and catch a few breaths. My other son was quick to say, "We're not allowed to do that. That's not following the rules." I assured both of them that they have the right to breathe and should do so when needed. Kids are affected. Consider risk versus benefit as you do in making any educated decision.
The time's up. I thought you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all.
That's all. Any other business before the board? Looking for motion to adjourn? Mr. Martin, do we have a second? Mr. Schneider, thank you, everyone.